Good morning and welcome to this morning's oversight hearing on the TLC with a focus on for-hire vehicles and commuter vans. My name is Selvena Brooks Powers and I am the chair of this committee. In addition to this oversight, we will be hearing several pieces of legislation. Intro number 100, sponsored by Councilmember Juan in relation to the suspension of alternate side parking regulations on Lothar. Intro number 276, sponsored by Councilmember Krishnan in relation to the wrongful deactivation of high-volume for-hire vehicle drivers. Introduction number 277, sponsored by Councilmember Krishnan in relation to taxi cab driver pay for electronically dispatched taxi cab trips. Intro number 323, sponsored by Councilmember Moya. Sarge, remove him, please. Let us be clear. We have a lot of people that have signed up to testify today. This is an official hearing. Anyone that is disruptive will be asked to leave the chamber. Intro number 323, sponsored by Councilmember Moya in relation to establishing maximum rates for leasing, rental, lease to own, and conditional purchase for hire vehicles. Intro number 939, sponsored by myself in relation to allowing commuter vans to accept hails from prospective passengers in the street. Intro number 950, sponsored by Public Advocate Williams in relation to increasing the number of violations required to revoke authorizations to operate a commuter van service. And intro number 1021, sponsored by Majority Leader Farías in relation to the suspension of alternate side parking regulations on Patriots Day. Since 2011, the for-hire vehicle industry has experienced monumental growth with the arrival of app-based for-hire vehicle companies like Uber and Lyft to the city. The council has always worked to ensure that this industry has grown in a sustainable and responsible way. In 2018, to maintain competitiveness for drivers, the council passed local law 147, which paused the issuance of new for-hire vehicle licenses with limited exceptions and tasked TLC with studying the utilization rate of these for-hire vehicles. The council also passed local law 149, which created a new license category for high-volume for-hire services, which covers for-hire vehicle bases that dispatch more than 10,000 trips per day, such as Uber and Lyft. Today, the council is ready to address these issues once more. My goal is to provide a forum where the public, advocates, and relevant city agencies can speak on record about what is happening, what needs to be done, and how we can help. One of the problems I want to highlight is the recent scourge of driver lockouts on the app-based for-hire vehicle companies. Many drivers today find themselves temporarily locked out of the system, unable to work and unsure when they'll be able to drive again. This July, Commissioner David Doe of the Taxi and Limousine Commission and the administration announced that the city secured agreements from Uber and Lyft to reduce driver lockouts, with plans to phase out the practice by Labor Day. That date has come and gone. Have all parties satisfied the terms of agreement? Has the TLC been working on its promised rule package to provide a long-term solution? What does a sustainable market look like in terms of balancing new drivers, reducing empty cars on our streets, and maintaining driver pay? In addition to lockouts, drivers and advocates have come to us with complaints about account deactivations. We want to better understand how deactivations are affecting drivers and learn more about the process in place to reinstate drivers. How many drivers are deactivated in a year? How many are reinstated? How long does the process take? What happens to drivers who can't get reinstated? For corporate entities, drivers may just be numbers, deactivate one and replace them with another, but for the driver, it's their livelihood on hold. But lockouts and wrongful deactivations threaten driver income, creating instability during a time where costs are rising and bills are piling up. I hope this hearing will arm us with the facts and a clearer understanding of what can be done to help drivers. In addition to the pressing issues faced by for-hire vehicle drivers, we are also confronted with the near collapse of the commuter van industry. For people in transit deserts like my district, commuter vans are a lifeline, providing crucial transportation to work or other essential activities. These vans serve areas and routes not covered by mass transit and serve populations that can't afford to take a taxi or drive to work every day. Before the pandemic, there were over 200 licensed commuter vans, and now there are fewer than 40. Many parts of Southeast Queens and Brooklyn have community vans woven into their fabric, even as residents still do rely on public transportation. I want to explore what can be done. Please remove them. Can we get order in the chamber? Again, we will have decorum in this chamber or you will be removed from the room. Thank you. I look forward to hearing, excuse me. I look forward to hearing from the TLC about the measures it has taken to safeguard the health of the aforementioned industries and the people who work with them. I am also eager to hear from drivers and advocates regarding their experiences, again, with the app-based lockouts and deactivations, their suggestions for improving these processes, and how the council can smooth the way. I also want to bring focus to the commuter van industry, as I mentioned before, which is a smaller market, but is no less important to the people who rely on them to bridge the gaps in our transit systems. Before we begin, I would like to thank my staff and committee staff for their hard work. Kevin Katowski, Senior Policy Analyst, John Basile, Senior Policy Analyst, Mark Chen, Senior Counsel to the Committee, Connor Mealy, Counsel to the Committee, Adrian Drapal, Senior Policy Analyst, Julian Martin, my Policy and Budget Director, and Renee Taylor, my Chief of Staff. As a reminder, hearings are designed for all voices to be heard on a given issue. Today is your opportunity to present your very best argument that can enlighten and inform the public. As of now, I do not have an official opinion on most of the bills being heard at this hearing. I look forward to a vibrant and respectful discussion today on all bills at hand. Next, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that are here. I'm joined by Majority Leader Amanda Farías, Councilmember Shekar Krishnan, Councilmember Joanne Ariola, the Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, and I know we will be hearing later on from former Councilmember Idanique Miller. Next, I would like to invite a panel to offer their firsthand experience and insight into the state of these various industries. We have a pre-panel that we discussed in advance with the TLC. And so with that, we would like to before we bring them up, we are going to hear from the Public Advocate, followed by Majority Leader Farías, followed by Councilmember Krishnan briefly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As mentioned, my name is Jumaane Williams, Public Advocate for the City of New York. I'd I'd like to thank Chair Brooks Powers and the members of the Transportation Committee for holding this hearing. I introduced one of the bills being heard today, Intro 950 of 2024. My intent is to address an inequity created by Local Law 41 in 2019 and to have the industry standard that applies for all for hire vehicles apply to the commuter van industry. For these reasons, I am also a co-sponsor of Intro 913 that would allow commuter vans to accept street hails, and I thank the chair for introducing it. Intro 950, as written, increases the number of violations required to take away the authorization necessary to operate a commuter van service. Here, the word service means the base operator and the entire fleet, not just the driver who was issued driving infractions. Local Law 41 makes commuter van operators responsible for the violation of individual drivers. This is not a burden that taxi cabs or other for-hire vehicles have. If an Uber driver has excess violations, it is the driver's individual license that gets taken away. In this scenario, Uber is still able to operate and have other Uber vehicles on the road. Intro 950 raises the amount of violations threshold from 3 violations in a 6-month period to 6 violations in a 12-month period. Looking to the future, the ultimate goal is to stop the unfair targeting of the commuter van industry. Commuter vans are an important part of public transportation infrastructure in New York City, and both the New York City Council and the administration must support commuter van networks by treating them equally under the law. Commuter vans are frequently the only form of transportation in public transit deserts, particularly in parts of Queens and Brooklyn. Commuter vans provide a key public resource with over 120,000 daily riders utilizing the service, but still are regulated in a way that puts tremendous burden on commuter van operators. Commuter vans fill a gap left by the city's inability to provide to consider out-of-borough commuters and are now a necessary part of New York City's public transportation network. We must work with licensed commuter van operators to make sure that there are safe drivers while not holding operators to unequal standards. And just a reminder that the commuter vans have been existing with other modes of transportation for many decades. Additionally, securing the future of commuter vans is a social justice issue. Communities of more color and immigrant communities located in transit deserts rely on commuter vans. Public buses are often unreliable and have long wait times, which force residents to look for alternative solutions. And some of these communities don't have any of those options. Many cannot afford the costs that come with owning and operating a car or using private transportation on a daily basis, and community vans are a lifeline of transportation. Community van service should be supported as part of long-term solutions in our 21st century infrastructure, plans that must address traffic congestion, high carbon emissions, and decaying transportation infrastructure. I also want to point out that Uber and Lyft were giving ease of entrance into our transportation system, even at the cost of people like the yellow cab industry. And our van drivers are primarily immigrant and Black and brown owners of small businesses. We want to make sure that we have pathways for folks to do this service legally and licensed. And so that's what we've been working on for such a long time. I do believe they can exist. I also think they can be unionized. That's another conversation. But we want to make sure that everybody has access to be able to feed their family and provide the services that all communities need. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Majority Whip and Chair Brooks Powers, for allowing me time to speak and for hearing my bill in this hearing. This bill is a reflection of New York City's commitment to honoring the diverse cultural and religious traditions that make our city so vibrant and to honor sacrifices made. By suspending alternate side parking on holidays such as Christmas, Yom Kippur, Diwali, Eid, and so many others, we are recognizing the importance of these days for our communities. Today includes consideration for Patriot Day, September 11th, to honor and remember the sacrifices made on this day by essential workers, public servants, emergency services personnel, and New Yorkers alike from across the city, to honor them in their sacrifice. This measure brings fairness and inclusivity to our parking regulations, respecting the traditions and important recognition of all New Yorkers while making it easier for residents to observe these recognition days without unnecessary burden. I look forward to hearing feedback from the administration on this bill, and I encourage my colleagues to support with their co-sponsorship. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Majority Whip Brooks Powers, for holding today's hearings. And good morning to everyone who's here today, too. Our hardworking Uber, Lyft, and taxi drivers are essential workers of our city. They carry this city forward before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and long after. They keep our city moving safely and efficiently. Many of them are immigrant workers, reflecting the truest embodiment of the American dream. And as an Indian American council member, the first Indian American ever elected to New York City government, where I represent the district with the highest number of drivers in New York City, I am proud to represent them in city government. However, the livelihoods of Uber and Lyft drivers can be thrown into chaos when they are deactivated from Uber and Lyft with little to no advanced warning. Our drivers, victims of predatory lending for decades, an issue we worked hard to resolve but took many years to do so. After resolving it, the unfair deactivation of taxi drivers is the single biggest issue that drivers face in this city. It affects their livelihood.
Sorry, council member. We ask that everyone please do not disrupt this hearing because you will be asked to leave. If you'd like to acknowledge something you agree with, just wave your hands. You may continue.
It is the single biggest issue that drivers face. It affects their livelihood. And when they lose their livelihood, they lose their ability to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage, to pay their child care, to support their families and simply live in this city. So when they are unfairly deactivated, drivers can be forced into a company-driven appeals process where the companies have the upper hand and make the final decision with no real meaningful process, with no notice in advance, and no real reasons listed or publicly available standard for what constitutes a fair reason for the deactivation. This is particularly consequential for a workforce that has to pay for the car, insurance, and licensing fees just to go to work every day. These expenses continue even when you lose your job. And that is why I am proud that Intro 276 will be heard today. My bill works in two ways. First, it increases driver protections before deactivations happens, creating a due process standard which everyone should be subject to and is a fundamental principle of American law and workers' rights. If Uber and Lyft believe a driver is not meeting their community guidelines, this bill requires them to enter into a progressive discipline structure where consequences will match the severity of the infraction. Additionally, drivers will be required to have at least 2 weeks' notice of an impending permanent deactivation. Notice in advance is an essential part of due process, and drivers don't have that today before they are deactivated unfairly. Second, my bill creates an independent appeals process for drivers to pursue after they've been deactivated. Drivers will be able to appeal the deactivation through a number of means, including arbitration or a complaint with DCWP. This means the drivers will have an independent, neutral arbiter and appeals process through DCWP. App companies will be required to give drivers the information necessary for them to build their case, and the companies will bear the burden of proving that their actions were justified. Drivers would be allowed a representative to help them through this process. If reactivated, drivers would also get back pay for the time that they were not allowed to work. Finally, drivers who have been unfairly deactivated in the last 6 years would have an opportunity to appeal with the city within a year of my bill's passage. The third point, as I mentioned, is that this process shifts the burden from the driver having to prove why they were deactivated after the fact to now requiring for-hire vehicle companies to justify why the deactivation was necessary. In other words, when a decision is made by an app company, it shouldn't place the burden on drivers after the fact to reverse that decision. The decision maker must provide the justifications for doing so, and that is where the decision should be placed. Again, a basic principle of due process in American law and for workers' rights protections. This bill would provide robust protections for Uber and Lyft drivers and open up an additional, not a replacement, an additional pathway for drivers to fight back against wrongful deactivations. And to be clear, nothing in this bill stops a driver from using other appeals processes if they so desire. When an app company unjustly deactivates a driver, it is up to city government to step in and provide basic worker protections and establish necessary processes. This bill, by providing process, notice in advance, making the burden with the companies, and a neutral arbiter, is a fundamental part of worker protections and workers' rights. And I could not think of a more pro-worker bill than this. Thank you.